Hey everybody, thanks for having me today. Who here has tried Jacobsen salt before? God damn, thank you very much. That is awesome. Portland is where we started eight years ago, this coming August 11th. I started the company after I moved back from Scandinavia and realized that nobody in America was making great salt. We're the first company to harvest salt in the Pacific Northwest since Lewis and Clark. And if you think about the historical significance of salt and that it's roots back to the word salary and allowed for international trade on boat via the ocean, it's a pretty impressive journey that salt hasn't been on in the U.S. and that's what we're out to do here in the U.S. is disrupt the category that in the U.S. that hasn't been touched before. I started out really just out of curiosity. I missed good salt from living in Scandinavia and realized that it might be possible. We're a country that's nearly surrounded by ocean water on 3 different sides of us, and realized that it was worth a shot. So I spent the next 2.5 years trying to figure out how to make great salt. And to me, great salt is defined by taste, texture, and color. When you taste our salt, it's very clean and briny with no bitter aftertaste. The texture of our salts is very light and flaky. And then the color is this brilliant white. It's beautiful, kind of iridescent white, looks like shaved ice. And all of those 3 characteristics of our salt are very deliberate in each and every batch that we make. So once I'd figured out how to make good salt, I then went and tested 27 different spots of water and made salt from all of those different spots of water. And realized that the best salt that I was making out of all of those different spots was from Netarts Bay. And if you haven't been to Netarts Bay, then you should go. It's beautiful. It's 85 miles west of here, right on the Oregon coast, and it is one of the most accessible places on the Oregon coast from Portland. It's a beautiful, quaint little town. There are 2 restaurants, one of which is a bar, and it's great. Anyway. I started hauling seawater in a rented U-Haul truck. I became a really very super frequent customer of U-Haul and spent 2.5 years renting U-Haul trucks with borrowed wine totes from a winemaker buddy of mine to fill seawater by hand initially and then drive that truck back to Portland, make the salt at Kitchen Crew, which is a culinary, it's a commissary in Park Blocks, Portland. And started the salt making process on a Friday afternoon, and then wouldn't leave the kitchen until Tuesday morning. And the salt making process is one that our salt making process is one that can't be interrupted. We filter seawater and then we boil it, and we boil it to remove the volume of the seawater, of course. But but most importantly, really, is to remove the calcium. And because you've tried our salt, thank you. You'll notice that our salt is very, very clean and briny. And the reason for that brininess and for that clean taste, and because there's no bitterness, is because we remove that calcium. And that calcium scales to the bottoms of our pots. And we still, to this day, get it out of our pots with rubber mallets and power washers. And on pot cleaning day at the coast, it's a very kind of loud and primal process, but it works. And then we move the brine, as we call it, into very shallow stainless steel evaporation pans where salt crystals form on the surface, then fall to the bottom of the pan, almost like a leaf cascading down from a tree. And we harvest the salt crystals off the bottom of the pan, let them drain and then dry. And so our process, start to finish, takes about a little more than 2 weeks from seawater to dry flake of salt. Let's see here. We also do a line of infused salts. We have done anything from a lemon zest salt, which I originally did our line of infused salts for our Kickstarter campaign because I needed a couple of interesting things to give away. So I was like, I'll infuse some salt or infuse some flavors into the salt. So we have a lemon zest salt. We also ferment garlic from scratch. We ferment 300 pounds of garlic at a time to make black garlic. If you've never tried black garlic, you should. It's rich, caramelly, almost sweet tasting, but in a garlicky way. It's a very odd flavor profile, but it's delicious, and it's kind of the ultimate essence of umami. So we ferment garlic 300 pounds at a time to make black garlic, and then blended that up into our salt. We also do a Stumptown coffee salt, a rosemary salt that we do for Burgerville, and all sorts of other things. Along the way in the first two years or so of starting the company, I started scratching my head, and after moving back from Scandinavia, started missing salty black licorice, and realized that that salty black licorice, here in the U.S. was all imported, and that was fine, and still is delicious stuff. But I had a salt company, and I had limited salt to sell at that time, and I wanted to extend my revenue as much as possible, and also my brand awareness on another facing on the shelf outside of the salt aisle, and decided to start doing salty black licorice. We now do a line of confections, so we do salty black licorice, salty caramels, salty honey nut chew, and chocolate caramel, and they are really, really nice. 3.5 years ago, we acquired a company called Be Local, a very small honey company. It was really just more opportunistic at the time. Be Local was effectively going to go out of business, and we were kind of on a good run at that point, and still are, of course. But we were on a definite upswing, and had some space to absorb them, and had some working capital to absorb them. And so when we acquired Be Local, their sales were very, very small, and the current business model as it stood was not sustainable. But what we did was we got them back into New Seasons, which was our first ever customer, by the way. Thank you, New Seasons, if you're here. And got Be Local back into New Seasons, and then back into restaurants, and back into beekeeping, frankly. When we acquired Be Local, they had 10 beehives. We now own and operate 125 beehives and employ a full-time beekeeper, which is cool. And so now we more view ourselves as a pantry supplier, and ultimately I think that's where you'll see Jacobsen in a couple of years, as we scale the business a couple of years down the road, is what are best-in-class ingredient staples and pantry staples that Jacobsen can shake up, have a very distinct point of view of, and own. Let's see here. Lost my train of thought. Let's see. New Season was our first ever customer. Salt and Straw, I don't know if they're here today, was our first ever customer to actually have us on the shelf. And then Pasta Works, which is now Providor, was our first ever customer to give us a check. And I still have a picture of that check. And if you're a small business owner, you understand the value of that first check. So it's been an exciting journey, and we just hired a woman named Mary Ellen Signer. She was CFO and COO at Stumptown Coffee prior to joining us, and brought them from 6 to 65 million, excuse me, and has been a tremendous asset to me and our team. We've got a fantastic board, and would be happy to chat afterwards if you have any questions. Thanks so much.